Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Stahls TV presentation on 5 ways to print a shirt and how to choose the best one. One of the most difficult challenges for decorators when they're starting out their apparel business or maybe looking to expand is trying to understand how each print technology fits in with one another and how to choose the best one for their business. So today with this Stahls TV class, we're going to talk about 5 ways to print a t-shirt, from screen printing to direct-to-garment printing, and 3 different heat transfer styles, including ink transfers, film transfers, and digital transfers, and how to choose each one. So if this is your first time attending a Stahls TV class, there's a couple people that will be helping me throughout the session. In fact, I even have an expert and kind of a guest appearance as well from one of our DTG experts at the Stahls office. So first, on the right-hand side of the screen, you're going to notice a chat or a question box. The goal of the Stahls TV classes is to always make them as live and interactive as possible. So as you have questions throughout the class, feel free to chat them in there. Jody Edgar will be standing by. She'll be responding and also helping to facilitate the questions so I can answer them on screen as they arrive. I'll also have Joe Kaczynski with Stahls TV, and he'll be helping to get some close-up shots when we print some of the different items from DTG to heat transfers. Lastly, I have Bob Robinson, who will be helping to come in and talk a little bit about direct-to-garment printing and some of the advantages and disadvantages there. Now that we know a little bit about the kind of roles and what we'll be doing here today, I'd like to know a little bit about who we have in the class. So Jody's going to launch a couple of poll questions, the first one being, what equipment do you own? I already mentioned that I'm going to be showing 5 different print technologies, so I just want to understand kind of the experience level that we have on camera here today and what type of equipment each of you have. So if you want to chime in, let me know if you have screen printing, heat presses, direct-to-garment printers, or if you create your own transfers with cutters and printers as well. So once we get to be about 80–90%, if everybody responded, Jody will close that down and let us know what we've got.
Okay, we have 8% for screen printing, 96% heat press, 96% vinyl cutter, 21% direct to garments, and 29% solvent print and cut machine. Okay,
wow, it's impressive. We actually have a lot of heat printers and vinyl cut owners. So hopefully the other 4 technologies we'll talk about here will help you understand how to expand your business. And then the second question is just your experience level. I usually get a variety of experiences on the class, from brand new, just starting out, to experienced and have had their business for 10+ years. So I'd just like to understand where everybody's experience level is in their apparel decorating business. All right, looks like we have about 75 or 80% responded, so we can go ahead and close that poll.
20% are experienced, 36 intermediate, and 44 are new to printing, just starting out.
Okay, great. So it looks like a lot of you guys are brand new and just starting out. We're excited to show you all of the options you have when starting your printing business and getting kind of into it and printing for a variety of markets. So to start out, this class is going to be a variety of different things. So we're going to start out with some videos showing print technologies and the process for all 5 of the ways to print a t-shirt. We're going to talk about the advantages, the disadvantages of each, when to use them, and then also talk about costing, what it costs to get into that print technology in-house, and also what it would cost to produce each garment, each t-shirt with that specific technology. So to start, we're going to start with screen printing. So I'm actually going to show you a screen printing video that comes from Ryanette. Ryanette is one of the experts when it comes to screen printing technologies and supplies. And we have a great video from them to show you the process and the steps that are taken for screen printing. Traditionally, there's about 15 to 19 steps in the screen printing process, so this video will walk you through from start to finish how to screen print a t-shirt in your own business.
The first step in the screen printing process is artwork creation. If you have a multiple color image you want to use, then you need to separate the image into layers so it can transpose to different colors on the printing press. You can do this in different artwork programs such as CorelDRAW, Photoshop, or Illustrator. If you're creating a new image for a print, you must consider the image itself and how you'd like the layers to be separated. Here, we see Ryan create a 2-layer and a single-layer image. Each layer must be printed separately once the artwork is done, for exposure on separate screens later. Once the artwork is created, it must be printed onto film positives, otherwise known as transparencies. There are lots of options on the market for printing on transparencies, and lots of methods for getting the best and darkest prints possible. We recommend Epson printers with the RIP software. For more information on outputting to film positives, visit our Films and Output Printers page on silkscreeningsupplies.com. Next up in the screen printing process is screen preparation and exposure. Screens come with either wood or metal frames. The mesh of the screen material varies depending on the type of job you are doing. Before you can coat and expose a screen, you must degrease the screen. This is a critical step in the process as it cleans all the contaminants off the screen so the emulsion will properly bond to the screen. For degreasing, you must use a screen printing specific degreaser. First, get the screen wet and then apply the degreaser product. Once the screen is sprayed with degreaser, you want to scrub both sides of the screen to thoroughly work the degreaser into the screen and then rinse all the degreaser out of the screen. Once completely rinsed out, place the screen in front of a fan or into your drying rack to allow the screen to completely dry. After degreasing, we move to coating the screen with emulsion. Emulsion is UV ray sensitive, so coating should always be done inside a darkroom, taking special care not to prematurely expose your screen. Add the emulsion into your scoop coater and then apply the emulsion to the screen. Apply emulsion to the flat side of the screen first, the inside of the screen next. Most emulsion coating only needs one pass from the scoop coater per side. Once the screen is coated, allow it to dry in your drying rack. Once your screen is coated with emulsion and dried, it is time to expose your artwork onto the screen. Lay your artwork transparency onto the flat side of the screen. Remember to flip over your artwork so it will print correctly onto the shirt. When the artwork is correctly aligned onto the screen, it's time to expose the screen. There are many types of exposure units on the market. Today, Ryan is using an automated UV exposure unit manufactured by Ryonet and available from our website. This unit is very effective and comes with a timer for convenience and highly accurate exposure times. Place your screen with the artwork taped onto it, face down, and exposed for the appropriate amount of time for your particular screen. Now that the screen has been properly exposed, you must take the screen and wash out the emulsion. Get the exposed screen wet on both sides. Allow the water to sit on the screen for at least 30 seconds to break down the unexposed emulsion. Once the screen has been allowed to sit, starting with the flat side of the screen, spray out the screen, washing out all the emulsion on both sides, leaving the image burned into the screen. After the screen is washed out, dab with newsprint and allow it to dry in front of a fan. Once you've thoroughly checked your exposed screen for any errors and fixed those with tape or red coat blockout, Now you're ready to begin printing. First, you need to set up the press with the screen on it. Once you've put the screen into the press, you must adjust it so it is level and at the right height. You don't want your screen resting directly on the shirt you are printing onto. Instead, you want the screen raised about 1/8 of an inch above the shirt you're going to be printing on. Use the off-contact adjustments on your press to achieve this. Today we're printing a one-color design. Apply spray adhesive to the platen and place your shirt, centered, onto the platen. Keep in mind that as you're setting up your job, testing prints using paper or an old shirt are always essential before you start production printing your shirts in order to get the best prints possible. Apply a good amount of ink to the base of the screen, just below your image. Proper squeegee technique is important to remember in order to get the best prints possible. First, flood your screen by moving the ink across the screen. Next, place your squeegee at an 80-degree angle and press firmly down onto the screen so the majority of your pressure is pressing down onto the screen, and then pull towards yourself. With proper technique, you will have very little ink left behind the squeegee as it moves across the shirt. Now you're ready to dry. If you're needing to do more than one coat or have a print that is more than one color, you will often need to flash cure the ink. You can use a heat gun or flash dryer for this process. Once the ink is dry to the touch, you can apply your second coat or other color. When you're finished printing onto your shirt, you need to do a final cure of the shirt so the ink is completely dry for long-term use. Again, you can use a flash dryer or conveyor dryer for much quicker, more efficient drying. Once a final cure is done correctly, the shirt is ready for wearing and will last a very long time.
So the screen printing process, as you can see, is a little bit labor intensive, but one thing about it is that it's very highly used, highly recognized by customers, and can be extremely cost effective whenever you're printing a large volume of shirts once you have the setup of the screen and all of that process completed. So let's talk a little bit about the cost to get involved, some of the advantages and disadvantages, and when you would use screen printing in your business, now that you have kind of an understanding of the process. So Jody, if you want to switch over to my screen, we'll talk a little bit about the screen printing process. So with the screen printing process, as the video had shown, there's a couple of costs that are involved to producing a garment with screen printing. When we're looking at cost, just the initial cost to get started, the average cost to get into screen printing in-house, including dryers, a 6-station is averaged to be about $10,000. You can get into screen printing with the screen printing press as low as about $1,500 and all the way upwards of $100,000, depending on what your business model is and how much you're planning on printing in your shop. To produce these garments, as I mentioned, there's a lot of costs that are involved prior to printing. The first one is going to be the setup of your screen and your screen cost, which is about $25. The screen making materials cost is about $1.50. This includes your tape and all of the accessories to get that screen up and started, including your positives. The ink cost is averaged for screen printers to be about 5 cents per shirt. This cost is pretty typical for what an ink cost would be depending on the design. And then of course we're going to include our shirt cost, which we'll see through all of these examples for printing a t-shirt will stay the same. Labor and overhead does vary, so I don't have an amount here because it obviously depends on the stations that you have in your machine, your overhead, and what kind of locations you have. So I tend to leave that out a lot just to look at it without that variable inside of all of the printing technologies. We'll break down the cost to produce specific jobs and what this looks for here in a second, but let's talk a little bit about the advantages, the disadvantages, and when to use screen printing. So as I mentioned, for printing high volumes, it's very, very cost effective and very quickly. While it looked like a lot of steps to set up those screens and go through that process of getting to the printing location, it is also, once you set up that screen, it's also very fast and very inexpensive to screen the ink on. So for large orders, it's without a doubt the most cost effective way to print t-shirts. It's also the most traditional method of printing. So if you're ever going into if any of your customers are purchasing from retail stores, this is likely the method of printing and the feel that they're expecting for a t-shirt, and that's why it's still so widely used. It gives you the ability to print detailed vector artwork, so splatters, distress designs, and different things like that. It gives you that ability to be able to print that. Now, one thing about this technology is it does have to be a vector art, so you're limited on high color counts or photo jobs, as we'll see in some of the disadvantages. So to the flip side, with screen printing, if you're looking to do orders that are 50, 100 plus pieces of relatively simple artwork, this is a great technology for you to have, especially if you have the room and the space for it. Some of the disadvantages is, of course, that it needs a dedicated space. It can tend to be a little bit messy. So if you're looking to start printing in a small location, maybe a part of your house, you have to have that area dedicated to your space. So this may or may not be the best fit for you starting out. It can be a bit time consuming to complete short runs and also pretty labor intensive and expensive. You could see in the video in the process that it kind of talked about just the steps that you got to the printing process. So if you're only printing, let's say, 5 or 6 shirts, that's a lot of work and a lot of labor just to print those 5 and 6 shirts, which was why it makes it so very expensive. As I looked at the cost a little bit about what it costs to for the screen and for all the supplies to set up the screen with the screen printing process, you can see that if I'm taking that cost and dividing it out amongst 100 shirts, it's very, very cost effective. But when I break it out against 6 shirts, it can be very expensive. There's also a pretty high learning curve for some of these print technologies, and screen printing is one of them. It also can be difficult to get trained staff. So if you're looking to print by yourself, you may want to look at other print technologies to get started out. Some other things about screen printing that you may look at other print technologies that we'll discuss here today is just that it's difficult for printing performance wear. So of course, even if you do screen printing cotton t-shirts all the time, we can look at other technologies for performance wear. You're a little bit limited on the items that can be printed. And it's also, as I mentioned, expensive for high color count jobs. So we're going to look at a couple of examples of how to price out screen printing jobs and how it compares to other technologies. When you're pricing out screen printing, you're looking, every time you burn that screen and you go through that process and the costs that are involved for making the screens, it increases the cost of your item because you have to do that for every single color that you're creating. So that can get very costly and very labor intensive for very high color count jobs. To look at some pricing examples for screen printing, we're going to compare this shirt here on the left of the screen, which is the small left chest logo. The design's very detailed, so this gives you a good example of a logo that would work well with screen printing. And it may be a typical screen printed job. It's a one-color design, vectorized, some great detail to it. Now when I go to print this design, you can see the cost comparison printing between 72 shirts and 12 pieces. Of course, the shirt cost is going to stay the same, but the screen cost, the screen making materials cost, all of that's going to adjust depending on the amount of pieces that I have, since I have to take that cost that's staying the same no matter how many items I'm printing and divide it amongst the pieces that I have. So when I'm printing 72 pieces with this one color job, the total cost of the job is going to cost me $174.10. The cost per garment, as I divide that out amongst 72 pieces, is only going to be $2.41. Very cost effective for printing this job with this high number of pieces in this job. Now when I go to print 12 pieces, the cost is going to increase significantly because I only have 12 t-shirts to divide my screen cost across. So we're looking at a total cost of the job at $51.10. And then we're going to divide that amongst our 12 pieces to get a $4.25 cost. So we're looking about a $2 increase for those lower quantities. And this is why a lot of decorators, when they go to only do 6 pieces or 12 pieces, will deny the business or will turn it away because it just doesn't end up being very cost effective for screen printing these types of orders. So take a look at your business model. If you plan on printing 24, 50, 100 pieces a lot with simple vector logos, screen printing is without a doubt one of the main technologies that you should increase with your business. If you're looking to do a lot more of custom work or high color count photorealistic images, then you may want to look at some other print technologies that we'll show you here, like direct-to-garment shortly. Just to give one more cost example of what a 2-color logo would cost and what it would look like We're going to talk about, again, the same scenario. Let's say that one color design is now a two color. With the cost, you can see the screen cost is now $50 instead of $25. It's increased because every time I add a screen, I'm then increasing my cost because that's $25 is the per screen cost. So now I've got to take the $50 of my screen, the $3 of my material cost, my ink cost, and my shirt cost, and divide that out amongst the 72 pieces. Still ends up being very cost effective at $2.79. Cost effective wise, if we're looking at a two color logo at 12 pieces, we're looking at about $6.47 per garment because now I've got to take that $50 screen cost and divide it amongst the 12 pieces. So when it comes to doing multicolors and low quantity, screen printing is just not the most cost effective way, and you may be the time to look at another technology, which a lot of you here on camera have the vinyl cutter and the heat press, so that allows you to do a lot of that custom low quantity orders. Jody, have I gotten any questions on screen printing that I can address before we move to direct to garment printing?
Yes. What would be considered long runs versus short runs?
It really depends on the items that you the quantity of your order and the color count. So you kind of have to look at it that way. Low runs are typically 24 pieces and below. For some screen printers for two color designs, they'll even say 48 pieces as their cutoff, but a traditional method for screen printing is the 24 pieces and below for low runs. High runs then starts at 24 for one color and goes up. But you're always wanting to, it always depends on the amount of colors in your logo and also the number of pieces in your job when you're pricing out these. Other questions?
What is the life expectancy of the screen printed t-shirt?
The life expectancy of a screen printed t-shirt, and in fact all of the print technologies that we'll show you here today are traditionally life of the garment, so they're going to last throughout the lifespan. I've got screen printed t-shirts that I've had I think for about 15 years now, and I'm still holding on to them, and the screen print actually still looks pretty good. So I'm sure I've washed them hundreds of times. So all of the print technologies when it comes to durability and washability are going to be very durable prints for the 5 technologies that we're going to look at here.
No other questions.
Okay, great. So that kind of covers screen printing. And like I said, it presents a great opportunity for everybody to print high quantities. And there's definitely a place in pretty much all businesses for this technology unless you're looking to be a completely custom house and print a lot of photo prints on t-shirts. If you're looking to do that, you may want to look at the technology we're going to look at next, which is direct-to-garment printing. I mentioned earlier I'm going to bring Bob Robinson in, who's one of our experts on direct-to-garment printing, and he'll walk you through the process, some of the advantages of it, and kind of get you in the know on this type of technology and how it fits in your business. So Bob, I'll hand this off to you.
Thank you, Courtney. Don't go far. I may need you. It's great to spend some time with you guys today. We're going to talk about direct-to-garment printing. As Courtney mentioned, screen print is always going to be the industry standard. It's what people refer to when they're just talking about just imprinting shirts in general. They use it generically as just screen printing because it's what we know. It's what we've grown up with. It's kind of the given technology. Yeah, drawbacks there as far as quantity and colors, as far how many versus the quantity of the shirts versus how many colors you're talking about. The flip side of that is direct-to-garment printing, where there are no real restrictions on quantity and colors. So we're going to walk through the process a little bit. We've got, when you're talking about direct-to-garment printing, there's a few steps involved. Nothing like there is with screen printing. It's a pretty basic process. You start with the shirt. The shirt that we typically like to use is going to be the ring-spun cotton shirt. I like a ring-spun cotton shirt because it's a very tight weave, and it gives me the better print. I have proven here recently that you can use some of the more open weave, open-end cotton type of shirts and get a decent print. What it's going to require is more pre-treat. Now, pre-treat is for a dark shirt. And let me know. Oh, I'm going to preface this too with any questions, spew them out. I love to work off of you, off of what you have to say, what you want to know. We can react to your questions as well. But to print onto a dark t-shirt, the white ink has to go down first. Just like in screen printing, there's a white underlay to give the opacity so that the shirt doesn't burn through the colors. So when you're going to a dark shirt, you need a pre-treat for that white ink to adhere to it. The white ink will not stay. It'll just kind of soak through the shirt if we don't give it somewhat of a primer. The other reason that you pre-treat a shirt is you want to bury the fibers into the shirt. If you zoom in tight on a really, really close, magnified in on a shirt, you'll see a lot of hairs. We call that fibrillation, little fibers sticking up in the air. We want to knock those down and keep them down during the printing process so that they don't stick up one through the ink and give it a kind of a blotchy type of look. You can also get what they call feathering, where the white ink actually will hit those fibers that are standing up, and then they'll lay down when you're doing the CMYK or the color process. You get the little white lines within the design, and if you've looked closely at some of those shirts, it's really not the printer's fault. It's not the direct-to-garment printer's fault, or the ink. It's usually the case of the pre-treat in the shirt. So most cases when I have someone who complains or says, I just can't get a good quality out of my direct-to-garment print, a lot of times it's the shirt or the pre-treat and the preparation at that point. So the process is, especially with dark shirts, now we can do white shirts as well, but everybody wants a dark shirt. It's hard to sell a white t-shirt to the general public unless you live in the Keys or something where they can't stand the dark colors. But you're going to pre-treat the shirt. Now, a couple ways to pre-treat. Pre-treat is nothing more than like a salt-based solution. It's, again, I keep using the term primer because I come from a construction background, so it's the base. It's what preps everything, gets me ready to make it look good. So you're going to spray this with this solution. It's just a clear, watery type solution that you're going to spray onto the shirt. You're going to make sure that it's nearly saturated so that you've got good coverage on the shirt itself. Once you've got it evenly distributed, you're going to press it on the heat press. Now, we've done this already today, and as we go through the process, the shirt that you see we're going to work with has already been pre-treated and cured, just for time's sake. So once it has been once it's been sprayed and been pressed with a heavy pressure for about a little over a minute or so, 350 degrees is a good number. What we're doing is we're drying out that pre-treat, and we're also burying those fibers down so we have a nice smooth surface to work with. Without the proper pre-treat, you're going to have either poor quality as far as the visual look, or if you actually overdo it, you can actually overdo pre-treat. You can actually get into some washability issues. It's not a tremendously precise science. You do have some range, and a lot of the pre-treat materials are a little more forgiving than others. So, I don't want anybody to panic and think I have to be a chemist to be able to produce a shirt like this. But there are different ways to go about it. So to pre-treat, 3 different options, at least in my mind, at least with what we offer. There are a lot of different pre-treat devices out there. One of the most commonly used ways is people are doing, at least on the beginning, on the start end, to eliminate or minimize their initial investment. They're just spraying by hand. Using a garden sprayer, a Wagner power painter, just a squirt bottle. I've seen all kinds. And actually, they're actually starting to make some pre-treating, some aerosol cans now for more like on-site type of printing where you have to react immediately to a pre-treat need. Secondly, and thirdly, there are devices that are more advanced. They're a little more automated. They're a little more precise. You can really dial in exactly how much pre-treat you're putting down, getting even coverage, or even pinpointing the areas that I'm going to pre-treat on the shirt. So, for instance, with the device that I'm really happy with, it has 6 different nozzles. The Viper XPT 6000 has 6 different nozzles across, and I can turn off 1, 4, 5, and 6, leave 2 and 3, and that will just do an area right here for my left chest. And I can also tell it I only want it to be maybe 6 inches long, so it's going to help me pinpoint the area that I'm pre-treating, which is going to save me pre-treat in the long run. The disadvantage of going hand spray is that I can overdo it because I'm a little concerned that I haven't gotten it all done. So I can kind of waste a little bit of pre-treat and maybe even overdo it as far as saturation goes. All right, so let's look at actually the shirt that we're going to be working with. We're going to put it on the machine itself, and we're going to print a design. Now on the heat press we have here, this is the Hotronics Auto Open Press. I do like to use an auto open press because remember the dwell time on this process is about a minute or better at 350 degrees. So I don't really want to have to be here and wait for this thing to beep so I can come lift it off. So we have pre-treated this shirt. We have sprayed it with the pre-treat solution. We have pressed it down and cured it so it's dry, and the fibers, I shouldn't be touching it this much because I actually could be raising up the fibers again. Now that has been cured and pre-treated. We're going to load it onto the DTG machine. Now while this is printing, I'm sure it'll be interesting to watch, but we'll go over some of the more details as we go. I like to thread the shirt on almost religiously because I like to work in one layer of fabric. If I would just lay it on top of there, the chances of me getting some wrinkles in there is greater, and which means I can't get my print the shirt actually close to the print head enough. It will do a decent job, a safe distance away, but what we like to do is get that shirt as close to the print head as possible. That's going to give me the cleanest lines, the least amount of overspray, so that I have a good definition. So I've loaded the shirt on. This is a 14 by 16 platen. We're going to use a ring around the outside, which is kind of just like an embroidery hoop, just to hold it in place. The good news about this particular device is, this is the Epson F2000. If I would get this shirt would be a little too high, too many wrinkles in it. There's a laser that shoots across here that lets me know that I have a chance of damaging a printhead by hitting the printhead, so it will reject it and say try again. In that case, I'll either lower the platen or I'll just fix the wrinkle in the shirt. Now, I'm working off a USB, just a simple thumb drive here. I like doing that because it keeps my computer from being tied up. I just have all my designs already preloaded on there, and I'm going to sort through here and say select print file and select the proper print file. I'm going to draw everything you see here is an actual design that's ready to print, because that's all that it will recognize. I'm going to choose this this black shirt, high quality Route 66. It says OK to execute. It gives me prompts. I love it. And hit OK to print. And it walks me through the whole thing. Hit the big blue button to go, and we will. Now the process is pretty simple, just like the screen print. It puts the white ink down first. That's going to give me the opacity that it needs to so that the colors look good on that black shirt. And then once it has completed the white ink, it'll put the CMYK or the full color. Now this is a very busy design. You'll probably get a chance to see this obviously when we're done, but I think Courtney has some samples of it as well later on. It still amazes me to think that I can put a shirt in a box and it comes out printed full color. It's kind of futuristic, and yeah, I'm old, so I'm still George Jetson amazed type of thing. But compared to what you saw with the screen printing process, the number of steps, when you look at this, we pretty much just took a design, put the right file type on it, and brought it into the RIP software, sized it, and said print. Chose the proper quality, and there's some adjustments within every RIP software, and you can tweak anything, but very simplistically, you can put that design into the RIP software, load the shirt, after it's pre-treated, send it to the printer, and it comes out printed. Total process on this, and it's going to vary as to how long it takes. Of course, we're doing high quality here today. High quality is going to mean I'm putting the maximum amount of white ink down first. The quality in the print usually is based on how much white ink is being put down, as to how good it looks, what the color saturation is. But on the average, you're looking at, I'd say maybe 3 minutes on an average size design of full color. Now, compared to screen printing, it really doesn't matter how many colors I have. That is the bonus of direct-to-garment printing. I can have 2 colors, I can have 20 colors. It can be photo quality, it can be gradients and fades and spatter and all types of different attributes to a design that really doesn't make a difference as far as the cost to produce and the time to produce. So with the number of steps, the screen charges with screen printing having the minimum of $25 per screen. That's per color, not per shirt. So if I've got a 6-color design, God forbid, I've got $150 that I have to amortize over the number of shirts that I've printed. Here it's the same cost to produce regardless of how many colors there are. So you add the cost of the shirt, the cost of the pre-treat, and the cost of the ink and whatever labor you have involved, and you've got your cost figured out. Speaking of cost, while that is printing, we'll deal with that just a little bit. And this is a very, very difficult thing to zero in on. Every design is going to have a different type of quality and the number of colors and how much ink I'm actually using, whether there's any ink in that area. As you notice, as this thing was printing, there's some areas that remain black. There's no ink there at all. That's because there's black in that design right there. So we're letting the shirt show through. So we actually saved some ink in that area. But back to the cost, on the average, you're looking at about 2 cents per square inch. That's the best way that I can really narrow it down so you can understand it and retain it, is about 2 cents per square inch. So a 10 by 10 design is about $2 to produce. And that's whether there's 2 or 200. So there's no real cutoff as far as, well, there is, because once I get 200 shirts of a 2-color, I'm going to screen print them every day. It makes more sense. It's going to be more cost effective. Do we have questions, by the way, while we're at this point?
We do. We have one question. In pricing with DTG, would it be cost effective with just white print compared to screen print?
It's going to be based on quantity at that point. It will print just full white, and it's actually a pretty cool look to take something that has a lot of fades and gradients, like a photo quality type of design, to do just white, or if it's just white lettering. And there are a lot of different varieties there, but it depends on the quantity. Here it's the same cost to produce, whether it's 1 or 100, but now we have to amortize against screen printing as based on the quantity of shirts that I'm actually producing. My cost to produce, of course, just white ink, that's just one color, so the 2 cents a square inch may end up being about $0.015 a square inch if I'm just using just white ink only. Now, if I'm printing onto a white shirt, which it happens, we print to a white shirt, you can eliminate the pre-treat, and you're eliminating the white ink. So I'm printing just the CMYK, or the full color, on the shirt itself. That can reduce your cost significantly. One, the t-shirt is more affordable. 2, there's no pre-treat. And 3, we've cut our ink cost down by about 1/3 because the majority of the ink that you're going to use is the white ink. This particular machine actually has 6 slots, CMYK in 4 of them, and then the other 2 are in white. But if you look at that quality and the number of colors and the fades and the gradients and the crisp edges here, this process has come a long, long way. I would not have been able to say I am a fan of direct-to-garment printing 10 years ago, because I really was not. It has really, really come a long way as far as the ease of use, the durability. This is washing as well as screen printing now. Couldn't say that years ago. And the lack of maintenance. This technology has improved greatly over the years. Even just recently, some great leaps and bounds in the technology as far as keeping the white ink from clogging. White ink is always going to settle. The titanium dioxide is going to settle down. Now, the good news is with the new ink technology, it just doesn't clump together permanently. So it's going to recirculate the ink while it's in the machines, keep it agitated. You'll shake the cartridges as well periodically, but for the most part, I don't want to say it's maintenance free, there's no such thing, but it has greatly improved to where it used to be. So the process isn't quite done yet. We've got the shirt here, it looks amazing, it looks great. We're going to take the ring off, and we're going to take it off of the lower plat, and I'm going to take it over to the heat press. Shoot.
Durability versus screen print.
Durability versus screen printing, they are synonymous, if everything is properly treated and properly cured. And that even comes into play with screen printing too. If the ink is not properly cured in screen print, it can actually have some problems too. That alligatoring or that cracking that you get in the dryer can create that type of issue. Now, Hollister has made a fortune on using a distress print on something that looked like it was worn out for 10 years, but straight off the press. But they're really identical at this point, at least with the Epson product, which is what we're talking about here today, which is what I'm comfortable talking about. Their ink technology has surpassed anything to date. We're going to cover it with this siliconized sheet. Now, we're using the same time and temperature that I did to cure the pre-treat, but in this case, instead of the heavy, firm pressure, I'm really just going to kiss this against here and just lock it down just till I just register about a 1 or barely a 1 on there. All we're doing is just curing that, drying that ink. Not just drying it, but it has to achieve a certain temperature for that permanently cure, so it's being very durable. The steam vapors that you see coming out of there, nothing more than just the water coming out of the water-based ink vaporizing so that it's curing as it goes. Now we have this upper platen cover on here, this to protect the heat press, not from this process, but from the pre-treat process. That pre-treat fluid on there is actually a lot more there, so there's a lot more steam, and it's actually a little bit corrosive because it is a salt-based solution. So if you live in the Northeast like I do, you know what salt can do to your car over the years as far as making it rust out, etc. We're just protecting our heat press at this point. Shoot.
How much did you say a 10 by 10 design was on
About
DTG?
$2 on the average. And again, this is so subjective. Somebody can prove me wrong 10 different ways, but just an average type of price, about 2 cents per square inch. So a 10 by 10 being 100 square inches equates to $2. That has been pre-treated, printed, and properly cured. It's ready to put in the box or send directly to your customer. So it's as many colors as you like. as easily as that. Now there's a nice cycle of production here too, because while that was printing, it's cool to watch and it's fun, but I'm not making any money. I'm going to go ahead and pre-treat additional shirts and cure the next one, so I keep a nice cycle of production going as I'm printing. Yep.
A gentleman is curious, why didn't you hover the press over the print before doing the full cure? Is that a special characteristic of the Epson ink?
That is exactly right. It's a special characteristic of the Epson ink. There are other inks out there that do require to gel or haze that ink over so that it doesn't mush it or squish it around or smear it. It actually has to gel a little bit up front. The Epson ink does not require that, and which is a nice time saver. Although it can't hurt if you choose to do that. As you can see, it didn't bother at all, and it has not affected durability whatsoever. One other thing I will mention, that as far as the pros and cons, when to use this, why direct-to-garment printing? Well, I would use direct-to-garment printing if the bulk of my business were T-shirts, which there are billions of printed T-shirts sold annually, so it's not a bad business to be in. And if 100% cotton is my mainstay. It's not going to be super effective on polyester. It's just, the technology is just not there. We're hoping for it someday, and we hope chemists are working feverishly at it right now, but right now it's difficult to get white ink to adhere to polyester. Now, white polyester, no problem. We can adhere to that because there's no white ink under it. It's the white ink adhering to the polyester that's a problem. So if I'm going to sell a lot of full color shirts, if I've got an online business and 100% cotton, I can mandate what shirt they get, and the feel of 100% cotton, especially a ring spun, is awesome. That's when the DTG would make sense. If I needed something a lot more versatile to go with a lot of different fabrics and or a lot of different objects besides T-shirts and basic flat cotton, then I might want to look elsewhere, and I'm sure Courtney's going to touch on those other methods of printing here in just a little bit. Okay, because I'm running out of time.
Okay. How long does a shirt take to print from start to finish?
They're going to vary. That one was probably a little over 3 minutes. That was a full color design. It pretty much filled up the 14x16 platen, 3 to 3.5 minutes. I've got another very simple equation, because I'm a simple mind, that it takes it's about $1 a minute. So if my design took 2 minutes to produce, it probably cost about $2 worth of ink in there. So it's just kind of just a simple equation to use to understand. Now, good news is the RIP software will tell you in advance after you run it through the ripping process. It'll give you an idea exactly what you're using, how much ink, and what your cost would be. So you're never surprised at the end.
Before.
You can pre-treat the day before. You can pre-treat days before, and a lot of people do adhere to that type of production, where I'm going to just go ahead and pre-treat all the shirts that I know I've got for a 30-piece job. I'll print them, pre-treat them all in advance, cure them, hang them. Be careful not to let them rub against each other. Either hang them or fold them gently face to face, so that you're not really lifting up the fibers, because that fibrillation that has raised up the fibers is the really thing that can affect your print quality. But yeah, no problem in pre-treating in advance.
How much can the shirt be sold for, like a price range on that particular shirt?
Price range on that shirt, the average that I have seen, and I'm not scientific by any means other than the fact that I talked to a lot of folks, most people are getting $15 out of that shirt. If you're online and it's customized just for them, they built their own, they're getting $20 to $25 out of those. But brick and mortar, face-to-face, talking to my customer daily, you hope to get $15 out of that, which is a nice margin on that. When you consider the cost to produce, everything's all said and done. It can maybe cost you $5 for shirt, ink, curing, labor, and everything. So it's a nice margin to have.
Cons about the white ink clogging the print head. Is that a problem still?
White ink clogging the print head is a potential problem. It has gotten much better. A lot of it has to do with the most recent technology. And I'm going to speak to the Epson, because it is, to me, the Epson has made greater leaps and bounds as far as the progress or the process progress of this technology. The ink itself, the ink technology itself is big. The fact that titanium dioxide, or the part that makes it white in that white ink, doesn't clump permanently. It's going to break up and keep active in the vehicle of the ink itself. They've improved. There's a recirculating system within the printer itself. the damper or the cap top is a harder surface, and it's keeping it much more airtight, because air is obviously going to be what's going to give you the potential for clogging. You will always need to do a nozzle check and make sure that the white is printing well when you first get up in the morning. But honestly, this thing sits here 2 weeks at a time. I walked up to it today prior to this, did a nozzle check. The white ink was missing. The CMYK looked good, and I did a cleaning, one single cleaning, about 38 cents worth of ink shot through it. The next test print was perfect. Now I'm printing shirts. So it's not as bad as it was. Always a potential, but nothing like it has been. Very, very pleased with the progress.
What would be the cost for startup?
The cost per startup is really going to vary with this particular device, which is, again, mostly what I know. Right now, you can get the printer and the startup ink for right around $15,000. There are models that go much greater than that. You can pay $40,000. You can pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. But as for this particular model, the average is right around 15 to, and that's the printer itself. You're probably going to have another $2,000 in the proper amount of pre-treated ink that you're going to need to get started, actually start printing shirts. So I would say you're in $17,000 to $18,000 range would actually get you up and running. The only thing beyond that is we'd consider what your pre-treat device would be, whether I'm going to start very manually and spray it on by hand, or whether I'm going to get a pre-treat device, which can run anywhere from $3,800 to $7,100. No other questions. I thank you for your time. I'm going to shoot it back to Courtney and let her take over.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank
Did a
you.
fantastic job there. So Bob's kind of covered a lot of the really great pricing information, advantages, disadvantages to direct-to-garment printing. I'm going to jump Jody right back over to my screen and just cover two different cost scenarios. Bob did a great job explaining how white t-shirts can be less expensive than printing dark t-shirts. Of course, you're going to be printing colored or black t-shirts most of the time when you're printing and when you're offering a variety of items to your customers. Just to give a cost example of what, let's say, 6 pieces with this full color 10 by 10 logo on a white t-shirt would cost. The cost to produce for something like this, you'd be looking at your $2 shirt cost. Of course, I've kept that standard throughout all of the print technologies that we're looking at. Your ink cost for a white t-shirt is going to be significantly less than what your cost is for the dark shirt, since you are taking out the pre-treat cost as well as the white ink cost. So you'd be looking at about 50 cents to do this full color print on a white t-shirt. Very fast, very easy, because all you're doing is laying down that full color ink onto the white shirt. So total cost for the job, I've got terrible math here. Terrible, I think it's right, yeah. 6 pieces, total cost for the job is going to be $15, and you're looking at about $2.50 for the per garment, including the cost of your design. And of course, you'd want to add your labor and overhead into that as well, so you may be upwards around $3. Taking a look at the example on a black shirt, again, that full color logo, now we're adding, this is the same size for the design. We're saying this is going to be a 10 by 10 design on that black shirt, very similar to what Bob just printed on the direct-to-garment printer. So we've got our $2 shirt cost, but now with the ink and the pre-treatment cost, we're looking at about $2 per shirt. So we're going to increase our cost. The cost to do a white shirt versus a dark shirt is a white shirt is about a quarter of the cost for the ink, difference between the ink and the pre-treatment. So our total cost, or cost per garment for this is going to be about $4. But again, the markup is really great. So if your business is looking to be able to offer a lot of custom full-color photo prints on t-shirts, this is absolutely the best print technology for that. It's got a nice soft edge to it, so it won't have a hard edge like we'll look at with some of the vinyl transfers here shortly. And it also presents a lot of opportunity for a nice soft feel. As Bob mentioned, the technology for direct-to-garment printing's really come a long way, so it really has, even on dark shirts with the white ink, it has a nice soft feel on the garment and allows you to get that full color image without it feeling thick on the t-shirt with this print technology. Jody, have I got any other questions on direct-to-garment printing before we move to the next section? Okay, great. So I think most of them were fired off at Bob. So the next section for printing t-shirts are going to be focusing on printing with a heat press and using heat transfers. So we're going to look at ink transfers, film transfers, and digital transfers. There, and I'm going to talk about ink transfers a little bit over here at the heat press. So since the vast majority of you guys do have heat presses already, I do want to talk about some of the different technologies on how to print a t-shirt with the 3 transfer styles available with this machine. Now, when we're starting with all of these technologies, We're starting with just the heat press. So one thing it's going to do with all of these ways to print a t-shirt, it's going to be very little investment and very little space involved, since all I need is basically an area to lay my heat press. This one is a swinger and draw model, so all I need is enough space to either swing it or draw it out, but it doesn't take a whole lot of mess or a whole lot of machinery in my shop, so I could easily do this in my house if I'm trying to just do a quick startup or a side business from a small location. I'm going to load my garment onto the heat press. The first step with any heat transfer is going to be, of course, loading the garment and getting it ready for the application with a preheat. What I'm using here for the application is an ink transfer. So separate from other transfer styles, this is actually commonly called a plastisol or a screen printed ink transfer. The reason being is this is actually a plastisol or a screen printed ink that has been screen printed instead of on a garment on a white release paper or a transfer paper. And then it also has a powder adhesive on it. So what it's going to do is when I flip this over and press it onto my heat press, the heat is going to release the inks from this transfer paper, and it's going to give me a nice screen printed feel on this t-shirt. So it's doing the same thing. Basically, the transfer supplier for these types of transfers has gone through all of the steps of burning the screen and using the ink and going through all of those 15 to 19 steps we had talked about, and made it simple for you to just basically load your garment onto your heat press, preheat to get some of the moisture and wrinkles out. That just helps to prepare the t-shirt for the application. And then I can line up my transfer for the recommended application. So screen printed ink transfers can apply anywhere from 4 seconds to 15 seconds, depending on the transfer type. So you can actually print these t-shirts in as quick as 4 seconds of a heat application. So imagine the opportunities printing multiples of these at once. This is a great alternative if you're looking to do screen printed t-shirts, but when you looked at that first process, maybe you thought that's just too much mess, or I don't have the space or the labor to be able to print these types of t-shirts. This is going to give you that same screen printed feel, screen printed look just as effectively without having to have all of the mess and all of the equipment and investment involved. So Jody, we'll switch back to my main screen. Now that we've seen how quick the process is for the ink, to the computer so I can take a look at some of the ins and outs and the pricing information for ink transfers. So ink transfers, like I mentioned, are very similar to screen printing. So the process, or the durability and some of the advantages are the same, but where you're really going to see a difference is going to be in the initial investment cost, as well as the process to get to the finished result for you in-house. So the initial investment cost is basically just the heat press. With these transfers, the way that the ink transfers work is you would send your artwork or your image out to a transfer supplier like Transfer Express. They would print the ink out on the release paper, send you that transfer paper, and then once you receive that, all you would need to do is take your garments and heat apply them for application. So there's a lot of advantages and, of course, a few disadvantages to this technology. So the process, as we saw, was just artwork creation, which can be created through either custom artwork from your customers, the same way you would with screen printing for custom logos or getting an artwork image there. Or you could really kind of reduce your costs and even increase your ability to offer more finishes by using a template-based system, using the artwork of the transfer supplier and just customizing it. And Transfer Express, if you aren't familiar with their technology, they offer a lot of great opportunities to personalize their templates and create transfers without having to have kind of an art degree like myself. I'm not a huge art technology kind of person. I'm not real good with artwork and software. So this allows me the opportunity to basically do what I do well, sell transfers, sell t-shirts, and not have to worry about the artwork side of it. So I create the artwork, order the transfers, and then load the garment onto the press and apply it. Sure.
The durability would it be the same as traditional screen printing?
Absolutely. So this durability is just the same as this screen printed ink. Of course, you'd want to make sure that you're getting a flat print area and a firm pressure on the transfer. But aside from that, it's pretty much, they call the transfer from Transfer Express goof proof, and it's very easy to do and a very durable technology. So let's talk through some of the advantages and disadvantages of the ink or the screen printed transfer. So advantages wise, we're looking at basically it's screen printed garments with little mess. As I mentioned, one of the big things about this technology is if you have kind of a goal in mind or a plan where, of course, you want to be printing 50, 100, 150 shirts, and you want to be printing these larger order sizes, but maybe you don't have the time to print or the space to get the screen printing equipment or the investment for it. This allows you the opportunity to offer screen printed garments with just a simple heat press, very little mess, very low investment. You can get into a very durable heat press for as low as $800. So there's not as much overhead needed because you don't need a large space or the large investment of equipment when you're looking at these types of transfers. It's also very cost effective for event printing, where we see a lot of decorators using this technology, even if they have screen equipment in-house. It's just being able to make it more cost effective for event printing. So basically they would take their t-shirts, take their transfers to a sporting event or something like that, and then print the shirts as they get the orders for them. Like I mentioned, some screen printed transfers apply as quick as 4 seconds. So even if you plan on having a screen printing business, there may be opportunities for you to still use these transfers to help minimize your inventory and print on-site at events with transfers. It's also very effective for printing performance wear. The reason being is that I mentioned one of the difficulties with printing performance wear with screen printing is just the difficulty in the inks and being able to cure the garment properly. So with the screen printed ink transfers, the transfer supplier has actually taken that equation out of it. They have low temperature transfers like Transfer Express's ElastiPrint that allow you to print the performance wear with your heat press instead of going through all of the advanced learning that's needed to print performance wear effectively with a screen printed press in-house. Along with all that comes the learning curve. Of course, you saw how fast and easy it was to load the garment onto the heat press and for me to apply the transfer. The most difficult part really for applying heat transfers is just making sure the transfer is straight. And that kind of comes with time, and there's of course tools to get you started in creating that and being able to apply things correctly as well. The last thing I'd briefly touch on is just template-based transfer systems, and that kind of just allow you to have limited art experience and get into the t-shirt business. So especially if you're a startup or you're looking to have limited employees and you're trying to cut maybe the art cost out of the creation process and you want to just be selling or printing, then the template-based transfer systems like from Transfer Express's Easy Prints allows you to create the artwork very fast, very effectively, and you don't need a whole lot of artwork experience to create that. Now, just like when we looked at the pricing for screen printing, it's not a cost-effective for short runs. We're looking again at quantities. So the higher quantity counts in your order makes it more cost-effective, and of course, the lower the color counts. So this follows the same pricing lines as screen printing. You want to look for those larger orders. That again at 50 plus pieces and under 4 colors is where I traditionally follow the ink transfers. Using ink transfers versus screen printing is one thing I often get questions about. Where's the benefits and the disadvantages? Of course, if you can screen print in-house and you have that technology and that space to do so, then it gives you more control over your production versus ink transfer, which kind of limits the control of that. And of course, there's a cost advantage of always being able to produce transfers in-house. As far as cost per piece goes, it's less expensive for screen printing a t-shirt in-house versus ordering a screen printed transfer, just because you're outsourcing it and of course increasing the cost just a little bit. Jody, have I gotten any questions on ink transfers so far?
There is actually a question. While on the carrier sheet, how long will they last? Like, how long will the transfers last?
That's a good question. It depends on the supplier. For some of the ones I'm familiar with, it depends on the conditions. So of course you want low humidity, relatively cool storage locations. If you can store them inside the box, that helps to keep them debris free as well. But you're looking, usually I always hear about 9 months to a year is where they definitely guarantee the expectancy. Anything past that, you may want to test for the ink and assuming that it hasn't peeled off the carrier. Any other questions?
No questions.
Okay, great. So ink transfers, again, presents a large opportunity for everybody to print higher quantities with just a heat press. So when you get those orders that are 50 pieces of a 1 or 2 color design, that's where you're going to want to move more towards the ink transfers. The next section we're going to look at is going to be well, I guess we'll talk about ink pricing a little bit before I move on to the next step. So ink pricing, just to give you an example of what a shirt would cost, kind of like the way I did with screen printing, if we're looking at a one-color design, let's say 100 pieces, below to the right is a transfer cost sheet for easy prints through Transfer Express. So I mentioned template-based ink transfers versus custom ink transfers. So a template-based ink transfer is going to be a little bit less expensive since the artwork's already created and it's just a semi-custom design. So you can, of course, save some cost there if you're looking to order transfers that way. So let's say a one color and 100 pieces, ordering a transfer from Transfer Express's Easy Prints, which would be their artwork, customized with your names, your logos, and things like that. For 100 pieces, the transfer cost, we're looking at one color, would be about $1.46. We've got our shirt cost, again, of $2. So for 100 pieces, our total job cost is going to be $346, or the cost for shirt is $3.46. So just to kind of compare briefly to the screen printed cost for something of, say, 100, earlier I believe we had covered what a 72-piece job in one color would cost if you were screen printing in-house, and we found the final cost to be $2.48. So looking briefly at the price sheet that I have here on screen, we'd be looking at about 72 pieces for our one color design. The transfer is going to cost us $1.87, $2 in our shirt cost, so we'd be looking at about $3.87. So we're looking about $1, $1.50 cost increase for us to, of course, order a transfer versus printing the item in-house. But of course, we've got the overhead of the $10,000 investment in our machine. So just depends on what your business model is accustomed to. The good thing is you can offer these orders and you can print these items for as low as $1,000 or as high in-house as $10,000, and it offers you that opportunity. Just to give an example of what a design and a custom ink transfer would cost versus the template-based, we're now on a screen that kind of goes through the custom pricing. So it's going to be a little bit more expensive. For this type of transfer, again, we'd be looking at $1.89 for custom artwork. So it's going to be about 40 cents more per shirt for me to order the transfer and my custom artwork from my customer's logo versus being able to use the template system from a transfer supplier like Transfer Express. So my cost per shirt for custom artwork at 100 pieces is going to be about $3.89. But you can see here on the screen, of course, as I get closer down into that 25 range, the one color design is going to cost me about $4.34. So when I added my shirt costs and my labor and overhead, I'm probably upwards around $7 for just my cost for this shirt. So sometimes when it comes to those lower quantities, 25, 24 pieces, it just doesn't end up being as cost effective for me as a decorator to print these t-shirts with this technology at these lower quantities. Of course, when I'm upwards of the 75 or 100 pieces, you can see the price gets more cost effective. And of course, as the color count goes up, so does the cost. So that kind of gives you a good view of how the quantity that you're ordering and the number of shirts that you're printing and the color count can really change whether or not this technology is most cost effective for you and the job you're printing. Jody, before I move to film transfers, is there any other questions I have missed?
No questions.
Okay, great. So the film transfer we're going to talk about, I'm going to show you the transfer here on screen and how they apply, and then we can talk a little bit about the do-it-yourself process and how to cut costs that way. So I'm going to jump back to my main screen, and then I'll grab Joe as well so he can head over to the heat press and press our next t-shirt. So I'm just going to grab my next item here. I'll take my screen printed ink shirt off of the press. So the one we just pressed was an ink. So it's very similar to screen printing, very similar to direct-to-garment. It's an ink that's actually being applied down to the t-shirt. The next two technologies we're going to look at are actually not just an ink technology. What they are is they're actually a vinyl or a heat transfer material technology. So this technology is a little bit different as it's actually going to, instead of being an ink and sitting in the fibers like the other technologies we've looked at, this is actually a heat transfer material, and I'll just lift it up off the carrier for you guys to get a good look on how it appeals. But basically there are 3 layers to this material. You're seeing a clear plastic carrier, which film transfers are traditionally called cad-cut transfers. or they are basically a film, a heat transfer vinyl or material that has been cut. This is the plastic carrier that keeps them pre-spaced from cutting them on a vinyl cutter. The front layer here you're seeing is the finished result that's going to be showing to my customers. And then the white layer here is actually just an adhesive layer. So one thing about this material is, of course, it's going to be a vinyl, so it's going to sit on top of the material. One other thing with cad-cut materials is that you are limited with this type of artwork as far as the artwork that you can create. The process for creating your own transfers require cutting, a weeding, and a heat application step. So we're not going to show the actual weeding and the cutting here on camera. Of course, we have more classes coming up this summer on how to create your own transfers if this is something you want to do in-house. But you're very limited on detail. So the detail I have here on the center of this cardinal is probably about as detailed as I'm going to get when it comes to printing this type of technology. Now, separate from the paper ink transfers, this actually has a see-through carrier, so it makes it very easy for me to see through and apply my transfer down. This transfer is going to apply for 15 seconds. It's called cad-cut fashion film, so I'll just apply this for the full application, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the limitations of this technology when it comes to printing. You may have noticed this is just a simple one-color design, so it's certainly not the full-color photorealistic quality that I've gotten from the direct-to-garment printer a little bit earlier. This technology, as far as color count, is very similar to screen printing, in that every time I increase the color, I'm actually increasing the cost because each color is separate. So with this technology, it's a single color roll of material that is cut and then applied down to the garment. So if I want to add silver to this design, I've got to separately create a silver transfer, apply my red, and then apply my silver transfer over top of it. So just like with screen printing, I've got to do a two-step application and increase the application and create another step every time I increase the color count for this technology. So it's going to change what I can do and create some limitations for what I can print. Jody, if you want to go back to my computer screen, we'll talk a lot about the advantages, disadvantages, and kind of cost to get into this technology. So film transfers or cad-cut transfers, for those of you with vinyl cutters, this is that technology where you're loading a single roll of material onto your vinyl cutter, cutting it, weeding it, and then preparing it for heat application. So it's actually only a four-step process, so it is very easy, especially for customization, which is one of the huge benefits of this technology. The initial investment cost depends on what you're looking to do. If you just want to order transfers in this type of technology to print 6 t-shirts very cost effectively, then you only need about $800 to $2,000 depending on what heat press you're purchasing. To cut it yourself and purchase a vinyl cutter, you can get into vinyl cutters for as low as a couple $100s, upwards of $2,000 for the actual investment of the vinyl cutter. If you're going to create the transfer yourself and kind of do it in-house, which is a lot of how a lot of decorators will move to this technology since it's so fast and easy to customize on demand, you're looking at about 2 cents to a penny per square inch, depending on your material. So one of the big advantages I find of film transfers is just that, the finishes that you can offer with this technology. So you're able to actually offer a ton of special effects with film transfers, from glitters to reflectives to suede-like finishes, neons, and it just creates a really fast and simple process if you want to offer special effects to your customers. It's also very cost-effective for low quantities. So if you remembered a little bit earlier, we talked a lot about what it would cost to do 12 pieces for a logo, or 6 pieces whenever you're using the screen printing process. And I think the screen printed transfer cost for 12 pieces was somewhere around $5. For me to screen print it in-house myself, again, I was upwards at about $4.50, $5 for my full cost of my design. If I have a vinyl cutter and I'm creating a one-color design in 12 pieces, I can create it as cost-effectively as $2.50 or $2.75 for my completed cost. So I'm really getting a more cost-effective way to create custom t-shirts and customize on demand, especially with single color graphics, 2-color graphics, names, numbers, for jerseys. Those are where this technology really fits in well. It also allows you the opportunity to print a variety of fabrics and items. So one thing with a lot of heat transfers, as far as the film transfers, and the next technology we'll look at with digital transfers, it'll allow you to print more than just 100% cotton t-shirts. So while this class is on 5 ways to print a t-shirt, of course, once you start your business, you'll likely be printing performance wear and jackets and nylons. And so this technology will allow you to print a variety of those fabrics and items. So if you want to print performance t-shirts, 100% polyester, this technology will allow you to do that versus the direct-to-garment where you were very limited to cotton t-shirts. Just with that, any color garment will work as well with the fabrics. Some disadvantages I had briefly touched on were limited detail in the design, so you're very limited on how detailed you can get. So those artwork images that come to you that are more photorealistic, they're JPEGs or they have splatters and distressed images in them, those are very difficult and almost sometimes impossible to do with this print technology because you're weeding away the design so it's not in ink, so it doesn't allow you to have those soft edges like a direct-to-garment or a screen printing press will allow you to do. It also requires vector art, so the direct-to-garment printer that Bob had showed you earlier actually allows you to print from photo JPEG images. With this, you absolutely need a clean line or a vector line. So of course your artwork would need to be created in a software like CorelDRAW or Adobe Illustrator, or CADWorks Live design software will work as well for your artwork and create it with a vector line to be able to be cut on the vinyl cutter. You're limited on colors, so just like with screen printing, once you get up of past 4 colors, 5 colors, 6 colors, it gets to be incredibly labor intensive because each color adds an additional step into the process and an additional cost. So it doesn't end up being cost effective once you get past really 4 colors for the film transfer. Some decorators will even stop at 2 or 3 because it just makes sense for them to move to a print technology at that point for their logo, sometimes even 2 colors. And it's also not as cost effective for large quantities. So we'll look at the pricing for film transfers and you'll see that the cost for 100 shirts is going to be almost exactly the same as it's going to cost me to do 1 shirt because I'm not getting a huge cost savings by cutting a ton of material since the labor steps don't amortize the way they do for screen printing. So just to give you an example of what a 1, a 2, or a 3 color design would cost you, on the right hand side of the screen you're looking at a logo that would be basically 10 inches by 9 inches. So very similar to the size of the design we were printing in direct-to-garment printing. And then we're looking at the pricing difference between a 1 color, a 2 color, and a 3 color logo. So at 1 color, if I'm cutting it myself, which is the CIY located below the cad-cut transfer 1, I would be about $1.40 in for my cost of my transfer for cutting it yourself. Since a lot of you have vinyl cutters, you'll be looking at that cut it yourself cost for 1 color, 2 colors, and 3 color transfers. If you're just getting started with a heat press, but you're looking for a more cost-effective way to maybe do lower quantities, you can see the cost to order those cad-cut transfers would be spelled out there at 6 pieces, 12 pieces, 36 pieces. So the costing is very, you don't save a whole lot of money as you get to higher quantities when it comes to film transfers, especially if you're doing them in-house. Again, you can see as I start adding colors, again, I'm doubling the cost for the cost of my material, so you want to keep those color counts very low when it comes to pricing out film transfers and how they fit into your business. So when I would use film transfers or buy a vinyl cutter is when I have the kind of business that I absolutely want to start doing a lot of customizing, names and numbers, special effects, and offering things on demand. So a lot of decorators that print for schools, sports, spirit wear, small businesses, a lot of those types of companies will use a vinyl cutter very effectively to offer less than 12 pieces, kind of those jobs that screen printers don't want to offer. Jody, have I gotten any questions on the film transfers throughout the presentation?
Are the cad-cut transfers more expensive than dark garment DTG due to the need to weed manually and put on the transfer, basically the whole process?
Switch back to my main screen so you guys can see me here as I answer the question. So the question was, is direct-to-garment sometimes more cost-effective? And sometimes it definitely can be, depending on what you're applying to. If you're doing a 1 color design that's relatively small, or that's a larger design for a white t-shirt, it may be more cost-effective to move to the direct-to-garment printer, and some decorators will do that. When it comes to vinyl cutting, let's say I have an example of a basic name and number that's a 2-inch high name by a 12-inch or a basic name, so 12 inches long by 2 inches high. I'm looking at about 20 cents in material. On my direct-to-garment printer, it's going to cost me anywhere from 50 cents upwards of $2 if it's on a dark t-shirt for me to print that type of design. So sometimes it's more cost effective. The weeding process, depending on the detail in the design, actually is very fast and very efficient. So if you're just doing basic text, basic clip art, the cad-cut is, with the labor included, is still going to be more cost effective for you to move to that technology. As you start to get to more detail, more color counts, absolutely move to direct-to-garment printing, especially if you're worried about a design that's going to be very difficult to weed. Any other questions, Jody?
Other questions.
Okay, perfect. So that covers film transfers, cad-cut transfers, and kind of gives you some options for customization. So the final way to print a t-shirt that I like to look at is kind of that technology to where it doesn't, the job you have doesn't fit into any of the other technologies that we've shown you here today. So this is the job that is very low quantity, very high color count, and maybe on a difficult to print item or a t-shirt that's a 50-50 or 100% polyester, and that is what I call the digital transfer or the solvent ink transfer. So this is going to provide an opportunity for those of you that maybe don't have direct-to-garment printers or aren't ready to invest in that technology, but want to be able to print full color or high color count jobs, or need that opportunity to print those lower quantities on t-shirts. And that's when we'll look at the digital transfer technology. So I'm going to move over to my heat press one last time and just apply the transfer and kind of show you how it compares to film transfers versus ink transfers. Remove this t-shirt, and I'll load on my one final shirt. So the transfer I'm going to be applying, again, very similar to the film transfer, the cad-cut transfer I just applied, is this is actually a printed vinyl. So just like the, or a printed material, so just like the cad-cut material, it's going to come as a white material on a carrier. I will print my full color design out on this, and then I have to go through the weeding process to create my transfer and apply it down to my garment. So different from direct-to-garment printing, one thing to keep in mind if you're going to use this print technology versus direct-to-garment is that this is, again, a vinyl or a material that's sitting on top of my t-shirt. So it's not as soft as a direct-to-garment ink. There are some materials that are softer than others, but for the most part it's going to feel a little bit more rigid and have more of a harder edge than an ink transfer like an ink process like direct-to-garment printing or screen printing. So one thing to keep in mind as you're creating artwork and you're looking for images for this type of artwork, you want to try to eliminate doing a full 10 by 10 box like we did with that car design for direct-to-garment printing. It's basically going to feel like a bulletproof vest with a vinyl basically blocking any type of air movement coming through the t-shirt. So it's just not the best artwork. Can this technology print that full color photo image? Absolutely. The technology was originally designed for printing banners, car wraps, and things like that. So it's going to be able to print that photorealistic quality and that high color count, but when it comes to a full block of design, you wouldn't want to cut a full vinyl material or full film and just apply it to your t-shirt. So the same principle applies for this. So you want to keep the images relatively comfortable as far as having open spaces throughout the artwork, and also keeping them relatively small as far as like a 10 by 5 design rather than a full 10 by 10 or 12 by 12. This heat transfer applies at 340 degrees for 15 seconds. I am just going to cover it to protect my carrier, which is a little bit of a thinner carrier. So for those of you that have solvent ink printers, which I think there were a few of you here that attended the class today, this would be the type of print transfers that you can print on a solvent or an eco-solvent printer if you wanted to begin printing these types of transfers in-house. Once that application is complete, I can peel back my carrier. So for full color images that are not incredibly detailed as far as free-floating text goes, or free-floating images, or that aren't larger, this is a really cost-effective and fast way to do so. You saw the time it took for Bob to print that full-color image out on the direct-to-garment printer. Of course, being able to apply a transfer in 15 seconds can be more time-consuming or more time-saving when it comes to that type of technology. Jody, have I gotten any questions? We're looking at that shirt before I talked a little bit more about costing, initial cost, and cost to produce these types of transfers.
Yes. What material or method would you recommend for a full-size image that would cover the front of that shirt?
So for a full color photo image on the front of this t-shirt, I would recommend direct-to-garment printing, more or less, for that. I mean, this technology will definitely print that full color photo, but like I said, it'll basically be like a shield or a block of material laying on top of the fabric. So the direct-to-garment ink is going to be the most comfortable filling transfer.
One more question. Does that material crack or fade?
It does not. So this technology, I tried to keep, all of the print technologies I've shown you here are basically life of the garment, so no cracking, fading, peeling. Some transfers, when it comes to looking at digital transfers, even have stretchability for performance wear, which allow you just to print more items and allow you more versatility of the transfer. Any other questions, Jody? Okay, let's jump back to the computer screen one last time so I can talk a little bit about cost involved to printing with digital transfers, what it would cost you to get into this if you wanted to print them in-house, and also to produce the transfer. So we're looking at two different cost scenarios here. We're looking at both the initial investment cost, which, as I mentioned, just like with the film transfers, you can order digital transfers from a transfer supplier like Stahls. If you go this route, you're looking at about $800 to $2,500 in the investment for your heat press. And then you can just order your transfers whenever you have an order for a logo, and of course your transfer cost would just be depending on your image. So you'll see here under cost to produce, you see a part where it says Stahls CAD print transfer. This would be the cost for you to order a transfer from Stahls, and it's priced by square inch design, so the 0.08 and the 0.14 cents per square inch. So as we look at some costing scenarios, if the pricing is for a 10 by 10 design, then of course my cost is going to be more like $8 for a CAD print transfer, and that can be very, very expensive. So not only does that no longer become cost effective versus direct-to-garment, but direct-to-garment becomes to be a better choice for this type of print, for not only the fill but also the cost for you to do it. But if I'm looking at a smaller transfer size, like maybe a 10 by 5, then the CAD print transfer may be more cost effective for what I'm looking to print. For those of you with solvent printers, or if you're looking to invest in print and doing a lot of these logos and printing a lot of items, of course with digital transfers, one of the big differences between this and direct-to-garment printing is, again, just the options of what you can print on. So you can print, eventually, if you expand past t-shirts to nylon jackets or bags, performance wear, there's materials that allow you to print, since you're printing on a vinyl instead of an ink to a fabric, so it's going to allow you to print these types of items and just kind of expand the versatility of your business with these digital transfers, even if you have a direct-to-garment printer or considering doing that most of the time. So if you're looking to print these in-house, a solvent print and cut machine can start anywhere around $8,000 as a traditional starting point. I think they may even be less expensive right now for a Roland BN20, around $6,500 or $7,000, so you're saving a little bit of money. But they can also go up as high as $15,000 to $20,000 for the machine. And that's when you're starting to look much more at printing more than just basic t-shirts. Of course, this technology is going to give you the opportunity, if you have the heat press, to print t-shirts with full color logos, but that printer can do much more as far as signs and banners. And of course, there's plenty of Stahls TV classes if that's the technology or the way you want to take your t-shirt business that you can watch either recorded online at stahlstv.com or in the future about how that print technology can work. Just to kind of cover some of the advantages and disadvantages of digital transfers. So advantages-wise, we're looking again, you're able to print high color counts and high detailed images. So if you're starting out in your business and all you have right now is your heat press, or all you're planning on purchasing is your heat press, between the ink transfers, the film transfers, and the digital transfers, you can basically print any job on a t-shirt. It may not be the best way to do that. Of course, it's always the best way to do something, but it does allow you that versatility. So different from the film or cad-cut transfers, digital transfers give you the ability to print high color or high detailed images. So I can get a very crisp photo image on my detail with these types of transfers. As I mentioned, you can also print a lot of fabrics and items, so you're able to print more than just t-shirts if you start to expand beyond that. And it's perfect really for those logos that are over 4 colors or hard to print items. So with screen printing, ink transfers, and cad-cut transfers, it was all very dependent on the number of colors you have and the number of items in your job, so how large the job was, how many pieces you were printing. When it comes to digital transfers, which is the transfer being used with a solvent ink printer or direct-to-garment printer, your cost is going to stay basically the same no matter how many colors you have. So I'm always paying for the price of my material. So if my design is 10 by 5, whether it's 2 colors or 100 colors, it's going to cost me the exact same cost because I'm paying for the material cost and the ink is pretty much staying the same. So that's why it's so great for those logos that are higher color counts or for even hard to print items. Where I have it's cost effective for all order sizes is just that the pricing can get more effective for when you're printing higher quantities versus lower quantities. So sometimes if you're printing hard to print items with high color counts, this is still a cost effective way to get a logo on a nylon jacket that's a high color count. So it makes it cost effective for that. Of course, you still would be more cost effective when you're printing, again, those 10 by 10 designs of full photorealistic prints with a direct-to-garment printer. Disadvantages, just in comparison to ink transfers or direct-to-garment printing, it gives you a hard edge and kind of a feeling of a box on a full shirt logo, so it's going to make it feel a little bit heavier and give it more of a thicker feeling than an ink transfer, which people are more likely accustomed to. So, of course, you want to keep your images pretty open and pretty airy so that they're not feeling like a box on the shirt when you're thinking of what kind of logos you would want to print with this technology. Also, if you're looking to start creating these transfers in-house, just keep in mind there is a relatively high learning curve for just learning the process as far as printing, setting up your artwork if you're not really into artwork creation and those types of processes just yet. So there is a little bit more of a learning curve with this technology versus some other ones on the market. One other thing with this technology, I don't think I have it listed here, but versus direct-to-garment printing where you can print a JPEG or a photorealistic image, I don't need a vector line or a vector image or a vectorized piece of art to print on my direct-to-garment printer. I can basically take any photo or any image, send it into my printer, and print it out on my t-shirt. With digital transfers, if you're not ordering them from a transfer supplier, you'll have to put a vector line on the outside of the image as well to be able to send it to the cutter and cut the design out. Jody, have I got any other questions on digital transfers throughout the session? I hear you typing away over there.
Yes, there is actually a question. Was there a black outline on the design on the image? Because she was asking because it didn't look like there was an outline, but she was told that we would have to put a white outline to make it black.
There wasn't a black outline, but there was an outline on the logo. So you may have noticed that I had mentioned that when it comes to these types of transfer styles, the logo, if you're ordering it in a digital transfer, so the transfer I have here, let's see if I can get a closer look on it here at the table for you guys to see. So this transfer you can see kind of has that white outline. So one thing about the logo, if you're ordering it in a digital transfer, is depending on the size of the text. So if there's free-floating text, this one actually would be okay. If there's free-floating text that's very thin, and I believe it's about 0.1 inches between the letters and the height of the letter that makes it difficult for the weeding process. So even if you're creating them in-house, sometimes very fine detail or very free-floating text requires an outline around the image for us to be able to create the transfer. It doesn't absolutely have to be black. You could try to get it to match the shirt. So if I was putting this on a white t-shirt, I could have the white outline. If I had it on a black t-shirt, I could put a black outline. So it kind of blends in a little bit better. I also have decorators that will actually match the outline color to the Pantone of their shirt. That way it blends in. Although you need that outline, it's not really real noticeable to the customer. So traditionally, depending on the artwork and the detail that's included, there will need to be an outline put into place. And of course, when you send your artwork to Stahls to be printed, they could let you know whether or not it needs to be added. Any other questions, Jody?
No other questions.
Okay, perfect. So we'll go back to my screen one more time, Jody. I just want to touch on some of the pricing for left chest logos versus full front so people can understand how this technology kind of translates over to what they're doing and what the transfer would cost them. Okay, so a 5-color, let's say for an example, we've got a 5-color left chest logo like I have here with the sync design. If I'm only printing 12 pieces, of course the 5 colors is going to be very expensive for me to do with screen printing, ink transfers, or even with cad-cut transfers. It's just too many colors for those types of technologies to consider. So again, I'm between either direct-to-garment printing or printing with a digital transfer. So this is kind of where the decision would be made. You either have a direct-to-garment printer and can create these transfers and decide to print them in-house on your t-shirt with this technology, or you have that heat press and you're just going to order a digital transfer. So if I'm ordering the digital transfer and outsourcing it on the right-hand side of my screen, the cost per garment in the end is going to be $3.47. I'd be looking at about $1.56 for my full transfer at the 4 inches by 3 inch logo for the 13 cents, I believe, per square inch that it was for that transfer that I was discussing. So we're looking again about $3.47 for me to produce that entire job with this digital transfer. If I was going to do it myself and I had a solvent ink printer, you're looking at about 2 cents to 3 cents a square inch for your design costs. So you're only again paying for where the ink goes down. So for the 12 square inches of my design and 4 inches by 3 inches, I'd be looking at about $2.24. So of course it can be more cost effective to do this type of printing. Just depends on what type of technology works best for your business and the investment that's required. To kind of compare from a full logo versus a left chest graphic, this would be a full chest logo. So if this design was 10 inches by 5 inches across the full center of the shirt, for that we'd be looking to do it ourselves. We'd be looking at about $1 in our transfer costs, and that includes the materials and the inks and everything that's included into kind of that standard cost, which would get us at about $3 per garment with the cost of my shirt. Of course, maybe more about $3.50 with your labor and overhead once you add that in for your business. To outsource it, this is where it gets to be a little bit more costly to order a transfer with a larger design. Of course, I've got 50 square inches of material, so I'm looking at about $4.50 for my transfer cost. And for the transfer cost for outsourcing, I'm just using the Stahls CAD print digital transfer pricing and the material Express Print. Express Print is traditionally the material that's most popular for t-shirts for digital transfers. That brings my full cost of garment to $6.42. Jody, any questions? I'll go back to the main screen so you can go ahead and fire them off at me.
We have 2 questions. Would you charge more for a left chest versus placing image in the center because of the time to place to the left chest?
No, traditionally the cost is actually less expensive sometimes for a left chest logo since you're using less material, so I would probably keep it the same. Surprisingly, it's actually incredibly easy to line up a left chest image on a t-shirt, especially with a heat press or a direct-to-garment printing or even a screen print press, since it's traditionally about 3 inches over from the center to 3 inches down. So it's really just as easy as actually applying a full chest logo. Okay, great. So just to kind of recap, when it comes down to choosing what's the best print technology for your business, take a look at what you want to, what space you have available to you, and what kind of business model you're tending to move towards. Do you plan on doing a lot of 1, 2, 3 color logos in higher quantities? Then maybe screen printing or ink transfers may be a best option for you. If you're looking to offer a lot of customization, maybe you want to do those full color photo prints on t-shirts like Bob had shown with the direct-to-garment printing, then direct-to-garment may be the best fit for your business. Other options for customization, if you want to be able to offer a little bit of everything, the heat press, of course, offers that option for you to be able to offer ink transfers for those higher quantities, as well as some more custom full color and customization, as well with special effects. So just take a look at your business model. Hopefully the class we've had here has been able to explain some of the ins and outs of all of those print technologies. Again, the recording will be available at stahlstv.com in about a week, so feel free to check back if you had some questions or want to review the presentation again. Other than that, Jody, have I got any other questions before we close out? No questions. All right, perfect. Well, I appreciate each and every one of you attending. I encourage you to take a look at the upcoming classes from July to September have already been launched on stahlstv.com. There's a lot of great classes for creating transfers and really getting into these print technologies more in depth. So thanks for attending. This has been a Stahls TV presentation.